Welcome back to another episode of A Warrior Spirit, where the inner warrior shines in their light. Today, I have the great honor of interviewing Bryan Flanagan. Bryan is a speaker, he's a trainer, he's a coach, all around great individual. And one of the reasons that I am so thrilled to have him on is because he worked closely with one of my idols for many years, Zig Ziglar. And if you're too young to know who Zig is, go look him up. And if you're old enough to know who he is, you know why I'm so thrilled to have Bryan on. So, Bryan, thank you for doing this for me and with me, and I appreciate you very much.
My pleasure.
So, Bryan, where did you grow up? Where was your start?
Well, if my wife were here, she would question that question. But my background is spent the first 30 years of my life in Baton Rouge, Louisiana.
Okay, well, that explains the accent.
Explains the accent and also the diehard Go Tigers,
Right.
big LSU Tiger fan.
Were you a small town or big town?
I thought Baton Rouge was a nice sized town. It was the second largest city in Louisiana, next to New Orleans. When
Okay.
Katrina hit, New Orleans slipped to third place. Baton Rouge moved up, and Shreveport moved up. But I thought Baton Rouge was a nice sized town. Yet you could get around. Great values for my family. Great environment. I always felt safe. I felt I was educated in the public schools. Always felt accepted with my parents and friends and family. So I had an idyllic childhood.
Did you come from a large family or a small family?
No, I was a baby of three. My brother was 10 years older. My sister's 3 years older. So as the last of the children, I had to work real hard to get attention. And that's where some of this humor or an attempted humor came in. I was always trying to make my big brother laugh. My big brother
Which is
happened to
hard
be the
enough to
last
do.
one I know.
Yeah, when you're big brothers don't typically laugh at the little brothers, but when there's a 10-year separation, now you're more of a, you know, pest than a
Yeah,
sibling.
he
So
was an elder statesman. Yeah.
yeah. So your family, did you spend your entire childhood in Baton Rouge, or did you move away? Uh,
No, the longest I'd been away until I was 30, the longest I'd been away from Baton Rouge at any one time was the 4 weeks in 1971. I spent a month in Dallas at IBM sales training. And that's a long, I grew up there, went to school there. I wanted to play basketball there. The coach's son had my scholarship, so I was a walk-on athlete. Went to work with IBM, stayed there until they promoted me in 1978.
Wow, that's unusual because a lot of us, we try to move away as soon as possible. We don't, stay in the rooted area. So, you said your childhood was pretty idyllic. Can you describe what your childhood was like
Had
for
great
you?
parents. My dad was a old time baseball player and couldn't make it to the big leagues. So we met my mother in central Louisiana. He was from northern Louisiana, and he was playing ball there and also working. And he met my mother. Then he was offered a job at Exxon. At that time, it was Esso, at Esso Refinery in Baton Rouge, to coach, manage, recruit, pitch, organize a semi-pro baseball team.
Oh,
If you
wow.
remember Field of Dreams, all those semi-pro baseball teams back in the Depression were huge. They brought the community together. So Dad went to work for Esso, and he also pitched and managed and coached and all the things he did with the semi-pro baseball team. So we were raised by a baseball father, and sports was important in our family. And I had the freedom of playing all the things I wanted to play, the support, and my dad coached. So it was it was great for me.
Yeah, that's in today's world and even some of your peers, that's pretty rare to have an idyllic childhood, fond memories. Uh, Basically, the Leave It to Beaver type family, you know.
Very much that my dad didn't wear a suit when we ate. Always worried about that. When was
Well,
it Hugh
well,
Beaumont? When
yeah.
Ward Cleveland would come in and not take his work clothes. A little different
Yeah,
from my house. But
mom,
Dad
mom wear the
also
pearl.
But also in 1954, my dad and mom started a part-time State Farm agency in our home.
Oh,
So I'd go out to play basketball in the backyard, and I see my mom in the renovated office selling State Farm insurance to the neighbors. And my dad would come home from his plant work, and he would sell in the afternoons and early evenings. So I saw a work ethic. I learned to work through my dad.
yeah. Well, you learned the joy of a childhood from the gift that your parents gave you, and you learned the work ethic that they exuded outside of their own workforce.
Yep.
So that's a great gift to give someone. What what got you wanting to be in sales? Was it watching your parents do this side hustle, or what?
No, because my parents raised me the same way your parents raised you. Here's what our mothers told us: don't talk to strangers, don't ask people for money. So we go into sales. I
Yeah.
wanted to be a high school basketball coach. But more than that, I'd been dating Cindy since my freshman year. She was a year younger at a different high school. And I was in my second senior year, and Cindy was in her only senior year, and we wanted to get married. So that summer, I went out and got a job at IBM as a delivery boy, making $3 an hour plus expenses. And any windshield time I had, I could expense the mileage. And we got married on that money and lived in married student apartment for the last semester we were in school together. And IBM hired me full time in the old office products division. For your listeners out there, I sold typewriters and copiers. And for the young listeners out there, before keyboarding, there was something called typing. And I sold
Yes.
electric typewriters. So that's what got me into sales. And I was an accidental salesperson, but I'm so blessed that I was. It has
So
taken me around the world. It has provided me to my family. We've put our kids through school, bought nice houses. So selling has been very, very nice to me.
I do have to ask you though, because copy sales and typewriter sales, I mean, at the very beginning of technology, you know, those were very popular, but yet I don't ever consider those to be easy sales. Like there's a lot of door knocking and grinding.
Oh yes, yes. I'm sorry. Yeah. At first I'm thinking, well, they're certainly easy to use because I guess one of my blessings was that in high school, my senior year, my homeroom was a typing instruction. I had took a typing class. Fast forward 4 years, the boss asked me if I could type, and I said, yeah, not knowing that I'd have to demonstrate typewriters and what we call magnetic card
Yeah.
word processors and all these things. As I was installing the equipment as a part-time worker, I had to show how to use the equipment. So that was kind of serendipitous that I knew how to type. Not a lot of words per minute, error free, but I knew how to type. But the knocking on doors was there. Yes, that was a big part of it.
So, coming from a non-sales background, of all the sales that a person can go into, you could have gone into retail, you could have gone into, a wide variety. Why, why choose the IBM?
I had a choice between one of my fraternity brothers was making really good money selling at a local men's clothing store that I would go to when I needed something, even in school. He was making good money, and I asked him, are they hiring, whatever? And sure enough, I got an interview. Then I asked my brother about State Farm, and he said, well, right now you probably want to go to work for IBM. They'll do a better job of training you. So after my graduation, IBM hired me, and I was lucky because I didn't have the best grades. I didn't have to interview. I never interviewed on campus. Nobody was looking at my grade point average. But the management, the leadership in Baton Rouge saw my work ethic. I showed up. I showed up on time. I showed up dressed to play. And they hired me off of that. And that led to a 14-year career. So I kind of stumbled into it. The people that were hiring me had more confidence in me than I did.
And sometimes that's necessary because we don't know our own potential. Others see it in us, but the ability to talk with others and connect with others. It's not just being able to communicate, because you are, from the little bit that I've known you, you are very quick-witted, you are very funny, and you said you use that as a defense mechanism
Yeah.
with your family. But where did you learn to connect? Because it's one thing to talk and it's another thing to connect.
Yeah, I think you have a propensity to be people oriented as a youngest child. Here's an aside. According to the birth order book, the first 23 U.S. astronauts in outer space were firstborn. 21 of the 23 were firstborn. 2 of the 23 were only.
Mm.
When you're an older child, you have responsibilities for your younger siblings.
Mm-hmm.
They go away, you take care of them, they come back, and the kids younger than you did something where you're going to be held responsible. So my brother was that one. My brother, the Marine, and started his own business. He didn't want to manage anybody. He wanted to be an independent. My sister's in the middle. She's the mediator.
Yep.
And then the youngest child, according to the birth order book, was kind of he was kind of left out. So you look for ways to get in and get attention. So I become the class clown, and I collect jokes mentally. I've never forgotten a joke. And that's good and bad. I'm demon possessed by Henny Youngman. That's not a good thing necessarily. My wife says you got to control it. But I had an opportunity to like people. When I was in the fraternity, I did things that would be around people. The offices that I held and wanted were membership chairman. So I did that for a couple of years, where we would go get in a car with another buddy, another brother, and we'd drive through Louisiana. And it was like athletic recruiting. We'd stop at some small little town or big town and go in and ask to speak with the boy, the kid, and the parents. And we tried to sell our fraternity, Sigma Chi fraternity, to these people. And I enjoyed that. I enjoyed meeting and greeting people as they came through formal pledgeship or rush.
Mm-hmm.
And it kind of led myself into being, a people person. I'm not an
And it's
analytical. I tell people when my bank book doesn't balance, I change banks. So I enjoy the people side.
yeah, and it's funny how these little insignificant parts of our life that we deem at the time as insignificant become these huge building blocks to our
Yeah.
future. You so you graduate college, you start with IBM, and you do really well there for 14
Well, no,
years.
I'll take exception to that.
Okay.
The, the, the first 6 years that I sold, I wasn't very good. I tell people that didn't mean I didn't sell a lot. I did. I sold my furniture and I sold my car, but I struggled early. And IBM had the finest training in the world, but it didn't take. It wasn't IBM's fault. I'm responsible for my success. It just didn't take. And I kept telling Cindy, who was a school teacher, maybe this summer I'll go get a certification and start teaching in the fall. And she said, no, in Louisiana, it was hard to make a living as a school teacher. And she knew that, as I did. So she said, hang in there. And she's, of course, been my biggest support. And I'm glad I did, because I had a chance in 1977 to go audition for 2 weeks in Dallas as a sales instructor. They would bring potential instructors in that were nominated by their branches to work with the National Training Center in Dallas. They had 4-week classes, and we did the middle 2 weeks, and we took over the students. And I had 6 students, and we worked with them. We practiced with them. We coached them. We encouraged them. We became father confessor, all the things that these new salespeople were going through. And I really liked that. And I got lucky, and I was promoted in 1978 to be a staff instructor at the National Training Center. And I tell people, tongue in cheek, but there's a truism. I was a sales instructor who couldn't sell.
Yeah.
Those who can do, those who can't teach, and those who can't teach sales. But about that time, I had a buddy who was also an encourager. And he said, Bryan, go out and buy this book by a guy named Zig Ziglar. So that January 78, I went and bought a book by a guy named Zig Ziglar. Never heard of him before. The name of the book is See You at the Top. It was his first book. I get to page 48, and one sentence changed my life. 46 years ago, January 78. And the one sentence was, you cannot consistently perform in a manner that is inconsistent with the way you see yourself.
Mm-hmm.
My mother told me that for 30 years. My wife had told me that for the 8 years we'd been married. But until I read that book, I was missing success by 12 inches. And
Mm-hmm.
that's the distance from my head to my heart.
Mm-hmm.
So IBM, was great as they were logically, intellectually, taught me, but Zig taught the people side. And he said in his book, between the lines, Bryan, let's raise your deserve level.
Mm-hmm.
And from that time on, 46 years ago, from that time on, I have really been serious about developing myself and also sharing with others. And you've got the same heart. You understand that. But I tell people, invest more in yourself than you do in your career, because personal growth precedes professional growth.
Mm-hmm.
So in my
Well,
in my seminars and workshops, I'm always trying to teach how to do good, but I'm also trying to encourage people to believe in themselves.
I'm curious, having been in sales for 40 years myself, I'm curious, most companies won't keep you around 6 or 7 years to get to that level if you're not doing well prior. So you may be self-deprecating in your assessment, but
Well,
you
I've
had to
got
have
proof.
been.
Unfortunately, I've got proof. I was a good guy. I helped at the office. I had great customer service. But we had the only typewriter. They took out the type bars in these typewriters and put in a little element. In fact, I got one here. Let me see if I can find my element. This replaced type bars. This is called the IBM Selectric Element.
Yep.
You could change your font size. We had the only one in the market. I went in exclusive, and I couldn't make my numbers doing that. So, unfortunately, if you miss your numbers a lot consecutive years, they raise an eyebrow. But I missed it, made it, missed it, made it, missed it, made it for 6 years, but I was a good guy, and I think my boss recognized that I wanted to. He gave me a chance. He gave me a chance as a delivery boy, and he certainly gave me a chance to go on to my first promotion. So yeah, I was lucky and blessed and fortunate. I had people that liked me. I had a work ethic, but it didn't click until I got a hold of Zig Ziglar.
But in having been as I introduced you, Zig was one of my first idol
Yeah,
people that in self-development. And as a young boy, from the time I was 13 or 14, when I got fully into scouting and was working my way up to being an Eagle Scout, Zig, I immersed myself in self-help, whether it be Zig or Tony or John Maxwell, whoever, as they all preceded Zig, but he was my first. And see you at the top is something I say a lot now because of Zig. I still have a lot of his cassette tapes, uh,
why?
long ways. But it's one thing to read a line that transforms your life. It's another thing to believe it enough to transform your life. And then, how long did you stay in your position before you had the fortune to then meet Zig?
Forced to do what?
To meet Zig
Oh,
Ziglar.
well, this is there's heartbreak in this story. I read Zig's book, and it really motivated me. Then I met people like you through marketing training, students, kids, mainly I was 30 when I got promoted, and mainly kids out of school. Not all, but most. But I kept meeting these guys and gals, mainly guys, that said, hey, that's a Zig Ziglar quote. I said, Zig, we would talk about it, and they would pirate tapes for me, illegally copy tapes and send them to me. So I got excited about Zig for a lot of reasons. And then in 1980, early 1980, I took a half a day off work in the afternoon, and I drove to Zig's office at McDonald's. And I walked up to the door. There was a sign, "We've moved." Oh man, I was at Mecca, but they moved. So then I went to one of his seminars. I heard him speak in a big session, 8 speakers, and they called it "Get Motivated" and personal growth seminars. And I bought his tapes and his other two books he had at the time. But I took a course from him before I left Dallas to go to San Francisco as a sales manager. And I had a chance to meet with him because he did a full week's course. And there were about 100, 120 people. They were recording it. So the price was right. And they knocked the price down because he was going to use it as a recording. And he loved to record in front of live audiences to get the energy. So I met him there. And Daryl, it's the strangest thing. I wrote him a letter saying, I really appreciate you. You've done so much for me. And he gets those all the time. But at the bottom of it, I think it was on IBM stationery. And on the bottom of Bryan Flanagan, IBM, Dallas, Texas. So I go to San Francisco, and in 1980 and 81, I get a call in November, about mid-November, and the lady said, Bryan, this is Lori Majors. I'm Zig Ziglar's administrative assistant. He wants you to be on the Phil Donahue show. And so I'm thinking somebody's pranking me.
Yeah.
She said, no, it's real. We'll send you the tickets. You fly to Chicago. Now, Donahue was not Jerry Springer. He became that later. He was still normal. So sure enough, he liked me enough, or he was using IBM enough to say, I want you to be interviewed on Donahue to kind of set the stage when they introduced me. So that's what they did. And Donahue came in the audience and said, what about you? You look like you. Well, I was struggling and got a hold of Zig's material, Let's bring out Zig Ziglar. So I was in. So I asked him for a job. He said, I can't move you from California. When you get back if you ever get back to Dallas, maybe we can work together. So my wife and I were trying to adopt our second child and couldn't out there for a lot of reasons. We worked real hard to get out of management, get anywhere in Texas, because a Methodist mission home in San Antonio would only work with us if we were Texas residents. So I got lucky and came back to Dallas, moved back to Plano, where we were the first 2 years, and now we've been for the last 42. And Zig said, Bryan, I'd be more than happy when we get an opening, we'll do it. Yeah, let's talk, stay in touch. So I did some consulting for him. I took off time to help train some of the courses when they had people come in for his Born to Win personal growth course. And then I had an idea. What if I wrote a course for him, brought it to him, and said, we can start a corporate training division, because my background's IBM. So I wrote a presentation skills course. In November, December, January, and February, those 4 months, we field tested this 2-day class. And in March, he hired me to start that, bring the sales curriculum with me. He could go do his speaking and his recording and his writing, and we would start building a team that would go into the corporate training division. So that's what I did for 29 years.
So I'm going to point out a couple of really cool things about that story. First off, I'm going to ask you, how much was that first seminar you went to see him live?
To see him live was probably $49, because this was at McFarland Auditorium in SMU, and they were probably 2,500 people. They sold a lot of product in the back of the room. That's where they made their money.
Yeah.
So
but it was $49 in 1980, right?
1979, 1980.
Yeah.
Yep, that time.
So that's like $200, $300, $400 now, right?
Maybe, yeah. It was expensive for that time.
Yeah.
And plus, I'd never been to one, so I didn't know what I was getting.
Yeah.
And the other guys, but the other guys and gals were great. Art Linkletter, Norma Vincent Peale.
But that's an investment in you that has compounded itself exponentially, right? Yeah. And most people aren't willing to make that investment in themselves.
And they also, if they get invited, they sit there and say, I don't belong here.
Right.
And when their buddy asked them to come, they knew they belonged there.
Yeah. And the other part that I want to touch on in that story, you didn't sit around waiting for Zig to decide that you were ready. You made decisions to create your own opportunity to be ready.
And I created it thinking I'd leave IBM and do this as a 1099. But Zig's vice president, who was instrumental in getting me into this industry. He said, "Well, let's do this. I've got some ideas. Let's get this thing up and working. We'll take your idea and my ideas, and we go to Zig and the leadership." Zig had a president. He had his first president probably in 1979, but in 1983 we started field testing this 2-day presentation skills course, and then in '84, Jim Savage, who was my really got me in. He was the vice president of my boss. He had some other things he was working on. He presented it at that time, and it fit pretty well. But our father always told us to charge the ball. Don't wait. Don't sit back on your heels and let the ball come to you. So that was the assertiveness. I wouldn't say aggressive, but the assertiveness, of proactive that I took, and I'm sure glad I did.
Well, that's where the sports training, because that what your dad said is a sports analogy to any person who's played ball.
Yep.
You don't let the ball play you, you play the ball. And you banked on yourself enough to play the ball because there was no guarantee that this course that you spent all this time creating, A, was going to work. So you tested it, and B, that he was going to accept it.
Or that he'd have clients that would accept it and clients that would trust somebody other than Zig Ziglar himself of the Zig Ziglar Corporation coming and training their people. So we bridged the gap, not quickly, but we did bridge the gap.
Nice. And so, how many years did you spend in Zig's organization?
29. I left for a couple of years. I always returned to the mothership.
Which was IBM?
No, I was returning to Zig.
Oh, okay.
I left. I was traveling too much, and my wife said, "Bryan, it's easier for me when you're not here." Pardon me. When you come home, everything's an inconvenience. You're not going to find a chocolate mint on your pillow tonight. So I left Zig for 2 years, and it was the right thing to do. I stayed in Dallas. I didn't travel, became a husband and a daddy again. It was the right thing to do. And then when I grew up and went back to Zig, he tapped me on the shoulder and said, "Some things are changing. I want you to come look at us." So I went back in early 1991.
So, I just admire your tenacity and your go-gettedness. You said something at another event that I saw, and I'm looking over here just so I get it right. You said, "Put your talent ahead of your passion."
I learned that from Zig's mentor.
And what do you mean by that?
Zig had a mentor named Fred Smith. He was not the FedEx guy. Fred Smith came to talk to one of our seminars in Dallas, and Fred was on dialysis, so he wasn't at his physical best, but his mental best was always there. And he said that sentence, "Put your talent ahead of your passion." So I wrote that down, and by the time I looked up, I'm thinking, let me get back to this. I missed the next 4 paragraphs. I'd never got a chance to ask Fred directly what he meant by that. But I go back in my life and I see exactly what he means by that. We can sell something, get excited about something, continue to talk, and buy it back. When we're out there talking about your heart, your passion to help people, we can oversell it. We're so passionate about it that we haven't brought the skills and the abilities to know how to introduce it. And I've got 2 verses on that, one secular, one faith-based. When I got out of Zig, I would drive in from Plano all the way 26 miles into Dallas, and I'd have those cassette tapes playing. I'd park in the parking lot, walk across the street, run up to the office. The guys and gals would be in the break room at IBM, and "Hey guys, I just heard another story by Zig. It's a Mr. B story. Mr. B," and all these people would be, because I was overselling, as opposed to saying, "Hey, if you ever have a problem with this, let me give you this cassette tape." I didn't know how to introduce it. Well, 10 years later, I did the same thing when I became a Christian. I oversold Jesus. I don't know if you can do that, but I managed to. It was amazing. I told friends of this experience of that I've accepted grace, which was an unknown ideal, and grace is so important. And a lot of people said, "Yeah, you've had a religious experience, you've had a lobotomy or something," and I didn't know how to. I wouldn't necessarily get in my salvation story, but I was trying to talk to my buddies. I didn't have the ability to do it. I've since learned to put my talent, my abilities ahead of my heart, of my passion.
Yeah, it's interesting. And I was going to joke the Hare Krishna have been overselling Jesus for a long time. Um, but you are in a profession where you connect and communicate for a living. You obviously did it very well, but yet you still at times oversold your passion and lost the connection. So even a seasoned professional can miss the mark on that occasionally.
Well, yeah, we had two classes I was doing when I first started with Zig. Obviously, I was trying to sell my course to get people in. And I knew how much it had done for me because I'd taken before I joined Toastmasters in 1972, I couldn't lead a group in silent prayer. I know how much, if you practice, I first started Toastmasters, my evaluator said, good, good organization. However, you said 16 times. That'll cost you $4. Oh, no, you don't owe me $4. You owe the pot. Every time you say, oh, we catch you. My first year in Toastmasters, I financed 2 club picnics. And I was spending more on my others than it was on my meals. So I understood and I got excited about selling the program because we can get you out of some of the distractions, not only your filler words, but when somebody says, ask you a question, oh, well, they don't need to hear the sound of your search engine. Well, I can cure people of that, or they can cure themselves using our skills. So I got excited about that. And also I was selling a goals program and I couldn't fill the seats. My passion didn't carry the sale. So I could give a great personal testimony, but I wasn't reflecting on where you are, what you want to do in your career. How often do you have to get in front of a group that you don't know very well and deliver critical information? And once I learned that, the corporate training division of Ziglar took off.
I think that's a key element to a lot of our communication with others. We don't meet them where they are. We meet them where we were or where we think they should be. And that causes that gap that sometimes then we're buying our own stuff back because we didn't fill the gap.
Yeah. One of the things we teach in presentation skills is make the movement match the meaning. Hmm. Make meaning match movement. So everything you're doing with your body language and also with your voice is supporting what you're saying. Oftentimes, and that's on the delivery side, but the content side, most people don't have a problem with content. They have a problem with delivery. They've got content confidence. They don't have delivery confidence. And selling, it's the same way. So again, you're always relearning. You never graduate from learning. Even though I'd been with IBM for 14 years and joined Zig, the learning curve, it was still there because I was selling a tangible. I was selling this for $18. It cost about 6 cents to make. And now I'm selling an intangible. Mm-hmm. So I'm going from physically looking at it, touch it, smell it, feel it, to fluff, air. I had to learn to do
ideation. Yeah, ideation. And when you left, did you start your coaching career when you were still with Zig or after you'd left Zig?
No, I was doing all of that while I was with Zig. But I left Zig full time probably in 2005, but I was still the product. I managed 7 or 8 speakers and trainers, but I was still the lead with guy, even though I was trying to build a book of business for my own clients. But I had an office at Ziglar. Even though I didn't work with Zig during the pandemic, they gave me a key to the building and allowed me to work there and do virtual coaching and presentations through their studio. So I've always been a part of that family. His family was very great, very gracious to my family, but I haven't worked for him since 2015. That's when Tom, his son, took the company to more of a consulting with small businesses and didn't do corporate training. So the salespeople that left Ziglar about that time with me, so to speak, we still do business with some of their clients. And I haven't been a member of Ziglar for 8 or 9 years now.
Well, let me ask you, if you hadn't attended that seminar and you hadn't written that letter, where do you think Bryan Flanagan's life would be today?
I don't know. I don't know that I would have stayed with IBM. IBM stood for I've been moved. My wife and I didn't want to do that. She moved around a lot. She's lived in different countries from Puerto Rico to Cuba, all over the States, because her dad was a field worker for the Chicago Bridge and Iron. She didn't necessarily want that for her children. So we would have stayed. When I was leaving the job in 1980 as a sales instructor and thinking about going into sales management, which was the progression, I interviewed several positions in the Dallas area. So I know we would have stayed in the Dallas area, and it would have been around sales and mainly sales management. That's what I was being trained to do.
It's funny how serendipitous one little action that we do for ourselves changes the trajectory of our entire.
Well, I've written 2 books. I've read 3, but I've written 2. And in the first book, I thanked Dan McCarty, who in 1972 said, Flanagan, you need some confidence. Let's go to Toastmasters. Well, that was the best investment ever made until I got a hold of Zig. Toastmasters did more for me than the IBM Corporation did as far as training. And I initiated that through Dan's. Then 6 years later, I get to Dallas, and Chris Schuneman from South Pekin, from Peoria, said, Flanagan, go out and buy this book. And he was the impetus to get me to get into Zig. So although, look, we've all had success along the way, helped by other people. I love selling because it's an individual sport, but I've never been successful in a vacuum.
Hmm. And during this entire time, was your family still on board with everything you did? I know your wife has been your biggest cheerleader and supporter.
Yeah, my wife is my greatest cheerleader. Yeah, I wouldn't be here had I not married Cindy. Trust me, you would know who I am. Except for going to San Francisco. We had to talk about that a long time, but the opportunity was I did a sales team that was comprised mainly that 14 sales reps reporting to me, mainly new reps, and that's what I wanted. I wanted to work with new people because I needed a lot of guidance when I was new, but I really didn't get it. Even though IBM was the best in the world, it just slipped by. So that's what I wanted to do. And San Francisco was good, but it just really stalled our family because of the adoption. And but I'm not sorry I went out there because I met some great people, got some memories, learned a lot. But we needed to be back here. We needed to be back home. And we think Dallas, the Plano area, is home.
When you were doing all this traveling and all these sales things, what was your wife doing?
She was raising thoroughbreds,
Your
Patrick and
children?
Quinn. She was raising those 2 thoroughbred kids. Yeah. Her when we met, we both had the same objectives. We wanted to raise a family, be churchgoers, and she wanted to be a stay-at-home mom. She taught school. She loved it. She was good at it. She did that for 7 years. And when we came here, we started the adoption proceedings. So she did that full time for a year until we got on the roll at the Methodist Mission Home. So Cindy was always supportive, always has been, believes in me more than I believe in myself. The number one rule of success for everybody listen up. The number one rule of success, marry well. If you've got the home court advantage, everything takes care of itself. Now you got to work at the home court advantage, but I married well.
Yeah, I truly believe that I wouldn't be doing any of the things I'm doing if it wasn't for my wife and the support.
Totally agree.
Because some of our ideas as men and salespeople seems crazy to outsiders, and sometimes we just need the family home life to say, "You can do that. Go do it."
One of the great shows, I love comedies, sitcom, was Cheers.
Hmm.
And somebody said, "It wouldn't be," and I'm not a drinker. The three worst places for me are hospitals, grocery stores, and bars. I don't fit in any of those. And so one of my buddies said back in 82, 83, when Cheers was getting popular, well, don't you want to go where everybody knows your name? I said, yeah, it's called home. That's the one my name at home. I don't care if somebody down the street in the bar knows my name. I want to be known at home.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's awesome. And as you've transitioned from your very lengthy careers, two different major
It's a nice way of
corporations,
putting it.
I have communication skills. When you've transitioned from that longevity into this next phase, what is on the horizon for Bryan Flanagan? Because retirement isn't a word that I ever associate with you.
Yeah. It's not in the Bible. So what does that mean? I have a lot of tread left on the tires. I think I've got a few years left. Dallas is the fifth largest market in the nation, and I can't find work here. So I want to try to end my career with more Dallas clients than clients in St. Louis or Phoenix or Seattle. And I'm doing that now, trying to be more of a speaker as opposed to a trainer, but also working the networks within Dallas, North Texas, that gives me a chance to meet some people that have been on the road. I just couldn't concentrate on Dallas. So now I'm trying to pull back a little bit. I always like training. I'll always be a trainer, I'll always be an educator. But there's something to be said for keynote addresses and doing inspirational speaking, not just training. So that's what I'm.
You
That's what I'm.
definitely,
That's why we met, because I'm in that transition period.
yeah, and you definitely bring a lot of wisdom, and you've joked on several occasions that I've heard you. If you're stealing this, then you're stealing it twice because I stole it from somebody. Um, but you have a great wisdom and a great propensity for helping others. And the fact that you still, even in this phase of your journey, want to give all that back says a lot about your heart and about who you are as a person.
Well, I had a lot of help getting successful. This past summer, in August of this past summer, I was asked by one of the Prestonwood Baptist Church, one of the members of Zig's old Sunday school class. He called it the Encouragers class. And what he would do, he would bring all these people in. He would talk about it from the stage and invite them to Sunday school. And then once you were there for a while, he'd say, "Look, you probably fit in this Sunday school class," and he would try to place you in the minister that the Sunday school class would do the same thing. He called it the Encouragers class. So one of the old members who was there when Zig was there, one of the old members said, "Why don't you come in and deliver a Sunday school message to Zig's old class?" And as I stand up there doing that, I'm thinking, this is the Encouragers class, and Zig really helped me to be an encourager. I want to be a Barnabas in people's like the son of encouragement. And I look back and see how many people encouraged me and believed in me and lifted me up after I failed. My manager at IBM, even though I didn't make my numbers as well as I should have, he was a believer and he supported me. And that was kind of 9 months ago was a kind of a solidifier that I like the role of encourager. I think that I'm available. And that's what I came to grips with. And as a Christian, we need to this here. As a Christian, we need to be available.
Well, I know when I started my podcasting journey, it was because I heard God tell me that I was supposed to. And like most of us, when God talks to us, we go, "What? Are you kidding me? I don't even own a microphone. How am I supposed to be on a podcast?" And what I heard was that this platform was supposed to give a voice to the voiceless. It was supposed to make their mess their message and be a survival guide for others. And I fought that for 6 months. I said, no, not me, not me. Well, God gets louder when you don't obey. And I got tired of the spiritual two by fours. So I bought a microphone, camera and started interviewing people who never had a chance to express their story and express their journey. And it's turned into something now where I am interviewing people like Bryan Flanagan, who I admire, not so much because I know Bryan Flanagan enough to admire Bryan, but I admire the journey that you went on and who you were associated with. And that really transforms what I'm doing because now I feel somehow validated because someone of your caliber is willing to come on my show.
Yeah, and I think we find like-mindedness in people who have a genuine affection for people and really know what it means to grow and to get out of your old self and shed that skin. You want to give back. You know, that, whoever said service is the rent we pay for being on the earth.
Mm.
There's, I can't remember a time in my life where I've never been supported. I know people. I know people with bad family backgrounds. I work with several people that have bad family backgrounds, and I never experienced that. I never had that rags to riches story. My dad may have because mother had the education he didn't, but it never stopped him. He never felt a victim. He was a blue collar worker that moved into insurance. I just always felt that we had a family that was the American nuclear family. We had people that worked. We had people that went to school, paid the taxes, supported their community, were good citizens. It's worth encouraging.
So, as we kind of wind this down, what would be your, or what is your advice to the young who are starting at the beginning of their journey, or maybe in the middle of their journey, trying to find their footing? What's a Bryan Flanagan?
Yeah, there are two things. There's two things on the sales side with young salespeople. You know, what does it take to be successful? And I said there are two things. Number one, learn your profession. Even though I went through it with IBM, I still had to learn it. I am not a natural born salesperson. I don't trust natural born salespeople. Nor do I trust natural born cardiologists. So learn your profession. And number two, respect your profession. And a lot of times it takes a while for us to respect our profession. And I guess that was part of my hang up early. But for other people that in general, for your career, any career in life, I think there's two things: work ethic and self belief.
Mhm.
And work ethic, Dad, play all 9 innings. Don't take an inning off. When you have a family, go home and take care of the game. Will be there tomorrow. But you play. If somebody's paying you for 8 hours, you work 8 hours.
Mhm.
And then the second thing is the the belief that you have that you're not all that you can be, not all that you will be, but you're a lot better than you used to be.
Mhm.
Yeah. So if you've got a work ethic and a belief, you're hard to stop. Yeah, you've got success in your future.
Just a matter of time. And like you, it's someone who's willing to create their own success, not make
I,
others create it
I
for you.
agree. Yeah. Sometimes you're put in a position to do it, but everybody's put in a position to do it. If you got a job, they got a job, the same strata in the company. One moves forward, one doesn't because one did something different or one did something more consistently.
Consistency is key, I think.
Well, we can close with this. Zig Ziglar's the most consistent man I've ever met. One of the many reasons I loved him, I've seen him be consistent with all the adulation and all the recognition he got. He asked for us at the work to pray for him in two areas: remain strong and remain humble.
Hmm,
And I saw him live both of those.
that's awesome.
Great role model.
Well, I'm going to ask you the final question that I ask all my guests. Bryan, what does a warrior spirit or having a warrior spirit mean to you?
Going to work when you don't feel like it, facing the things that are hard to face. I believe we all have warrior spirits and we just don't tap into them. I think we were born with achievement, whatever that means, with something bigger than ourselves. But to take the time to look at it, fold it, unfold it, pack it back up, that was my growth spurt. But I didn't do that till I was 30.
Well, you're never too young or old to get started. So I appreciate your heart. I appreciate the time that you took away from your family to join
Well,
me
you made
today.
it easy, except for the dog. You
Yeah,
you made it easy. Thank you.
I appreciate you, and blessings to you and your family. And I look forward to our continued journey together. And just thank you so much for just being, Bryan Flanagan.
Yeah, thank you.
I appreciate it. Have a great night, Bryan.
I'll do it.